It was parked at a trailhead in the San Gabriel Mountains, east of Los Angeles. Dusted lightly with pollen and surrounded by the kind of silence that makes you feel like you've arrived somewhere final. The keys were inside. His wallet was on the passenger seat. There was a water bottle, half empty, wedged into the cup holder. Everything looked deliberate, like he'd simply stepped out for a moment and would be back before the sun got too high. But Jacob Gray had been missing for 7 days. When his mother saw the photos the search team sent her, she said something that would stay with everyone who heard it. She said, "That's exactly what Jacob would do. He'd make it look like there's no reason to worry." Jacob was 26 years old when he disappeared on April 5, 2017. He was a software developer living in Olympia, Washington, quiet and competent, the kind of person people described as steady. He didn't drink much, he didn't use drugs. He had a job he was good at, a small circle of close friends and parents who spoke to him every Sunday. On paper, his life looked fine, and if you had asked him, he would have told you it was. But something had shifted in the months before he vanished. Something small and slow, the kind of thing you only see in hindsight when you're searching for patterns that weren't obvious at the time. He'd started taking long drives alone. He mentioned once to a coworker that he liked how empty the highways felt at night. He'd begun running more, sometimes at odd hours, sometimes without telling anyone where he was going. His friends noticed he seemed distracted, but not in a way that alarmed them. He still showed up, he still smiled. He was still Jacob. In late March, about 2 weeks before he went missing, Jacob told his parents he was thinking about taking some time off work. He said he was tired. He didn't elaborate, and they didn't press him. It seemed reasonable. He'd been working long hours on a project that had dragged on for months. Everyone gets tired. Everyone needs a break. His father suggested he come home for a weekend, maybe go fishing like they used to. Jacob said he'd think about it. On April 4th, Jacob sent a text message to his mother. It was short and unremarkable. He said he was going hiking the next day, that he needed to clear his head, and that he'd call her when he got back. She replied with a heart emoji and told him to be safe. It was the last time she heard from him. The next morning, Jacob drove south. It's not clear when he left, but his phone pinged off a cell tower near Olympia just after 6 a.m., then again near Portland around 9. By early afternoon, his phone was pinging towers near the San Gabriel Mountains in Southern California, more than 1,000 miles from home. He didn't stop anywhere long enough to leave a trace. No gas station cameras caught him. No one remembered seeing him. It's as if he drove straight through, alone, without pause, guided by something he never put into words. When Jacob didn't call his mother that evening, she wasn't immediately worried. He'd said he was going hiking, and sometimes trails take longer than expected. Cell service can be spotty. She waited. By the next afternoon, when she still hadn't heard from him, she called his phone. It went straight to voicemail. She called again an hour later, then again. By the third day, she contacted the police. The Olympia Police Department opened a missing persons case, but there wasn't much to go on. Jacob was an adult. He'd left voluntarily. There was no evidence of foul play, no signs of crisis. His bank account hadn't been touched after the drive south. His social media had gone silent. His last known location, based on cell records, was somewhere in the mountains of California, a place he'd never mentioned visiting before. The police notified authorities in Los Angeles County and flagged his vehicle in the system. Then they waited. It's strange, the waiting. People imagine that when someone goes missing, the response is immediate and sweeping, that search teams deploy within hours and the world stops until the person is found. But the reality is slower and quieter. The first days are filled with phone calls and paperwork and the awful task of trying to describe someone's whole life in a few sentences to a stranger on the other end of a line. Jacob's mother did this over and over. She told them he was responsible. She told them he wouldn't just disappear. She told them something was wrong. even though she couldn't explain what. On April 10th, 5 days after Jacob's last known location, a park ranger found his car. It was parked legally, tucked into a space at the trailhead for the Mount Baldy Trail, a steep and punishing hike that ascends more than 4,000 feet over rocky terrain. The ranger noticed the car because it had been there for days without moving. When he looked inside and saw the wallet, he called it in. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department launched a search the same day. They brought in helicopters, search dogs, and a team of volunteers who combed the trails for any sign of Jacob. They found nothing. No footprints leading into the wilderness, no discarded items along the path. No one at the trailhead remembered seeing him. It was as if he had parked the car and evaporated. Here's what they did find: a journal in the back seat, unopened, a duffel bag with a change of clothes, neatly folded, a receipt from a gas station in Oregon, time-stamped at 7:30 a.m. on April 5th, and in the glove compartment, a printed map of the San Gabriel Mountains with no markings, no circles, no indication of where he planned to go. The journal became a point of focus for his family. Jacob had always been a writer, though he never showed his work to anyone. He kept notebooks filled with thoughts he didn't share, ideas he didn't explain. His mother wanted to read the journal, hoping it might offer some insight into where he'd gone or why, but the police advised against it. They said it was evidence. They said it needed to be processed. So she waited again, and the waiting felt like drowning. When the journal was finally returned to her weeks later, it was mostly empty. There were a few entries from months earlier, mundane observations about work and weather and a book he'd been reading. The last entry was dated March 28th, more than a week before he disappeared. It said, "I think I've been running on empty for a while now. I just didn't notice until I couldn't move anymore." People have spent years trying to decode that sentence. They've wondered if it was a sign of despair, a cry for help, a casual observation that meant nothing at the time, but everything in retrospect. The truth is, no one knows. Jacob didn't elaborate. He didn't leave a note. He didn't send a message that explained what he was feeling or what he planned to do. He just stopped. The search for Jacob lasted 11 days. Teams scoured the mountains, following every trail, checking every ravine, calling his name into the empty air. They used drones and thermal imaging. They interviewed other hikers who had been in the area around the time he vanished. No one had seen him. No one had heard anything. The mountain, vast and indifferent, gave them nothing. On April 21st, the active search was called off. The sheriff's department said they'd exhausted all viable leads and that continuing would be unlikely to produce results. Jacob's case was reclassified as a cold missing persons case, which meant it would remain open, but no one would be actively looking for him anymore. His family could hire private investigators if they wanted. They could organize their own searches, but the official effort was over. Jacob's mother did hire a private investigator, a man who specialized in missing persons cases in wilderness areas. He spent weeks retracing Jacob's likely path, talking to people in the nearby towns, reviewing the case files. He came to the same conclusion the sheriff's department had. Jacob had most likely gone into the mountains and hadn't come out. Whether by accident or intention, the investigator couldn't say. The mountains are dangerous, especially for solo hikers. People get disoriented. They fall. They take a wrong turn and can't find their way back. It happens more often than anyone wants to admit. But Jacob's mother couldn't accept that. She kept returning to the details that didn't fit. Jacob was an experienced hiker. He'd grown up in the Pacific Northwest, where the trails are steep and unforgiving, and he'd never had an accident before. He was cautious. He prepared. He wasn't reckless. And if he had wanted to hurt himself, why drive 1,000 miles to do it? Why leave his wallet in the car, his keys in the ignition, as if he intended to come back? There's a theory some people hold, quietly, that Jacob didn't intend to disappear at all. that he drove to California because he needed distance, needed space, needed to be somewhere no one knew him so he could think without the weight of expectation pressing down on him. Maybe he planned to hike, to sit at the summit and look out over the world and figure out what came next. Maybe he thought the act of moving, of climbing, of putting one foot in front of the other would help him feel something other than the exhaustion he'd written about in his journal. And maybe somewhere along the way, he changed his mind. Or maybe he didn't change anything at all. Maybe he just kept walking. His friends have talked about him in the years since, carefully, the way people do when they're trying to make sense of something that doesn't have an answer. They've said he seemed fine. They've said he never asked for help. They've said if they had known, if he had just said something, they would have been there. But he didn't say anything. He smiled and nodded and went to work and came home and lived his life in a way that looked normal from the outside, even though something inside him was quietly collapsing. There's a phrase people use sometimes when they talk about cases like Jacob's. They say the person fell through the cracks. But that's not quite right. Jacob didn't fall through anything. He was seen, he was known, he was loved. People were paying attention, or at least they thought they were. But attention isn't the same as understanding, and understanding isn't the same as knowing what someone needs when they can't tell you themselves. It's possible Jacob didn't know what he needed either. It's possible he thought the tiredness would pass, that the weight would lift on its own if he just kept moving. It's possible he convinced himself that the best thing he could do was handle it alone, the way he'd always handled things, quietly and without fuss. And it's possible that by the time he realized he couldn't carry it anymore, he was already too far away for anyone to reach him. 7 years have passed since Jacob disappeared. His case remains unsolved. His car was eventually towed from the trailhead and returned to his family. His belongings were boxed up and stored in his childhood bedroom, untouched, as if he might come back one day and need them. His mother still keeps his phone number saved in her contacts. She says she can't bring herself to delete it. Every year on April 5th, a small group of people gather at the Mount Baldy trailhead. They're mostly family and a few close friends, though sometimes strangers show up too, people who heard about Jacob's story and felt compelled to be there. They don't search anymore. They just stand together for a while, looking up at the mountain, and then they leave. There's no closure in a case like this, no moment when the mystery resolves itself into something comprehensible. Jacob is gone, and no one knows why. Not really. The best anyone can do is guess, and guesses don't bring people home. But here's what stays with you, long after you've heard the details and seen the photos and read the timeline. Jacob Gray was not ignored. He was not forgotten. He was not invisible. He had people who loved him, people who would have helped him if they'd known he was struggling, but they didn't know because he never told them. And he never told them because somewhere along the way, he'd learned to carry everything alone, to make it look easy, to make it look like there was no reason to worry. And so he drove 1,000 miles to a mountain he'd never been to, parked his car at the edge of the wilderness, and walked into a silence he didn't come back from. Sometimes the hardest thing to understand is not why someone leaves, but why they never asked to stay. Jacob never asked for help, and maybe that was the problem. Maybe the weight he was carrying wasn't something anyone could have lifted if they'd tried, but maybe it was, and now no one will ever know. What's left is a car at a trailhead, a journal with an unfinished thought, and the aching realization that sometimes people don't disappear because no one cared. They disappear because they didn't know how to let anyone see how much they were carrying. And by the time someone thought to look closer, they were already gone.